So this morning, for the next few weeks, I want to talk a little about this topic of putting first things first. And here we find ourselves at the beginning of a new year, and we'll all have to make that shift into writing a new number on our date, right? If you're writing a check, which no one does anymore, or your homework or whatever it is, no more 2024, now it's 2025. And I brought a little calendar here this morning. I don't know where we got this from, but I was just thinking about how every year we begin with a clean slate, right? Maybe starting to fill up a little bit. But we have this brand new 12 months ahead of us. And we think about that. Maybe we want to begin with some reflection, looking backwards before we look forward. As you look back at the past year gone by, the last 12 months, maybe some of us look at it with some joys, maybe with some regrets. Maybe we can look at things that we've accomplished, that we've done, maybe things that we wish that we have done. As we think about how we used our time and energy and resources, maybe we feel like we've focused on maybe some things that did matter, but maybe we spent a lot of time on things that didn't matter. And as we look at the year ahead, maybe we're thinking about what do I want to plan for the coming year. Right? As we step back and look at the bigger picture in front of us, where are we going to be at the end of 2025? What do I want to look back and say, this is what I did with that year that has passed? And this morning, as we come together as a church, I want us to just really consider the things that God has for us to focus on as his people. And begin with some questions and some reflection of where we are as God's people and what God has for us. And I want to walk through three verses in Proverbs that kind of help focus us on this idea of thinking about what should be put first in our lives. And the first one is in Proverbs 27. It says this: "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations." Okay, I don't know about you, but I haven't been checking my flocks very much recently. I don't know if you guys have any flocks. But this verse is kind of giving us a picture of a shepherd, right? And the shepherd has however number of sheep that he's caring for. But this proverb is reminding us that this farmer needs to pay close attention to his sheep. Right? He needs to keep an eye on them and their condition. Right? If he's not careful, sheep can get sick. They may not be eating right. They might have unseen health issues. But for a farmer, it's very important for him to keep watch on his flocks. Right? Things can go unnoticed if they're not carefully paid attention to. Recently, our dog, we take her every few months to the groomer to get washed and haircut. We don't do that ourselves. We tried, but it didn't go well. So we take her to the groomer, and after this time, when I went to pick her up, the groomer said, "Oh, did you know that she has a skin infection on her ear?" Right? And so after she cut the hair and she did the grooming, she's able to see that there's this infection. And what I realized is I had no idea that it was there. I couldn't see it under the fur. And what I realized is that I was not paying close enough attention to the health of our dog. Right? And just like a farmer may not pay close attention to his flock. Right? And in the same way as people, we can easily allow things to slip by in our lives if we don't pay careful attention to them. If we don't carefully look at where we are and what we're doing with our lives, things can easily go by in the unseen. And all of us have flocks in different ways, areas of responsibility or people or things that we watch over. And this verse is reminding us to pay careful attention to them, or to keep watch over them. If we're not careful, these things can pass us by. Sometimes it's easy for us to focus on the immediate things of what's in front of us, but not be paying attention to the more important things that truly matter. Sometimes for us, some of us, it may not be until we go to the doctor that we realize we should be taking better care of our health. Maybe we have health issues that we don't even realize. Maybe for some of us who are parents, we don't pay close enough attention to the condition of our children. As long as they're getting okay grades, they're not going through any major crises, we don't focus on maybe how they're really doing. Maybe what are some of the issues or struggles that they're facing? What are the things that are going on in their hearts and their minds? Maybe for some of us who are married, it's easy for us to not keep close eye on the condition of our marriages. Marriages don't become unhealthy overnight, but oftentimes it's over a process of time and maybe months, even years, that these relationships can grow in an unhealthy way if we don't keep up with them. Even as a pastor, I find that it's easy for me to get caught up in a lot of the things that have to be done every week. There's always a sermon that's coming on Sunday, there's Bible studies, there's youth group, there's meetings, there's events. And sometimes it's just, as long as things aren't falling apart, I'm just getting through another week. But maybe I'm missing out on some more important things. And so this verse says, pay close attention to your flocks. Why? Why? Because riches do not endure forever, and the crown is not secure for all generations. Or what is this proverb saying? It's saying that our choices today can have long-term ramifications down the road. Right? If we don't keep careful attention to our flocks today, they can result in things that may affect us in later times, later dates. Right? We cannot take tomorrow for granted, but the choices that we make today affect our lives in the future. And so we need to look carefully at the condition of our flocks, and of our lives. All right, so if I were to ask you this morning, how are your flocks? How are your flocks doing? All right, how are the different areas of responsibility or priorities in your life? Are they being cared for? Are they being watched over carefully? Are they being shepherded and stewarded responsibly in a way that God has called us to? Or how are your flocks? All right, a second proverb I want to share this morning is Proverbs 24:27. It says, put your outdoor work in order and get your fields ready. After that, let me fix this. Okay. After that, build your house. After that, build your house. Okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? I imagine this person, maybe another farmer, buying a new piece of property. And he has a lot of things to get ready. He has to prepare his house. Maybe he's redecorating. Maybe he's remodeling. Maybe he's, setting up new things, buying furniture. But this proverb says, before you do all these things, before you get your house, before you build your house, get your fields ready first. Get your fields ready first. Why? Because the field is the thing that generates income. It provides sustainability. It provides long-term provision. And so this proverb says to make sure that your priorities are in order. Okay, make sure your priorities are in order. It may be more interesting to take care of your house, to build your house, to focus on your house, but he's saying make sure the most important things are taken care of first. Okay, make sure that your fields and your outdoor work is in order. Okay, when you put your fields in order first, then focus on building your house. Right? Okay, the application for us here is very obvious. Make sure you put the important things in your life first before the unimportant things. I was recently listening to a talk about this idea that's called the Eisenhower Matrix. How many of you guys have heard about this? Eisenhower Matrix. It's a very kind of old, popular idea. And it comes from a speech that President Eisenhower actually gave to a conference of churches. He's speaking to this gathering of church councils. And he kind of put forth this idea that there are things that are urgent and there are things that are important. And he says that those two things are different. Right? There are things in our life that are urgent, but they're not important. There's things in our life that are important, but not urgent. Right? And what is the difference? Right? An urgent thing is something that needs immediate attention. Right? Those are those things on our to-do list. They have to be done right away, or else bad things will happen. Right? They're the things that demand our time and our focus and our energy right away. But there are things in our life that are important, but not urgent. There are things that maybe affect our calling, our purpose. There are bigger issues of why we are here, what God has for us in our life. And often those things are not urgent. They're not demanding our attention, but they can be easily overlooked. Right? And so this Eisenhower matrix is kind of interesting. It helps us divide our life into these different areas and challenges us to look at how we approach those different things. Right? So there's things in our life that are urgent, and not urgent and not important. Okay, what are those things? A lot of these things are things that we just do to waste our time. Okay, maybe it's watching TV. Maybe it's scrolling social media. Maybe it's playing video games. Maybe it's going shopping. Maybe it's mindlessly scrolling on our phones. Right? These things are not particularly important, nor are they urgent, right? But they're things that sometimes consume our time. And they're not necessarily bad things. I think it's good for us to enjoy, these things in life, sometimes to just veg out and turn our brains off. Those are good things. But we want to make sure that those things are not taking the place of more important things. And maybe some of us, we are spending too much time on things that are not important and not urgent. Things that are just wasting our time. Things that are just misusing the opportunities that we have in front of us. Sometimes we can allow unimportant things to consume so much of our lives that it keeps us from the truly more important things. They become like things like the writer in Ecclesiastes says, we're just chasing after the wind, chasing after vanity, and wasting the time that we have. All right, the next two, urgent but not important, urgent and important. These are kind of tricky. Okay, what's the difference between something that's urgent and not important and something that's urgent and important? Okay, something that's urgent and not important may be something like, paying the bills, maybe like responding to emails or text messages. It may be doing laundry or washing the dishes or cutting the lawn, raking leaves. I always struggle with this. I feel like, when I'm cutting the grass, I'm like, this is not important, right? This is not why God has put me on this earth. But yet, these things are urgent, right? If we don't cut the lawn's going to look bad. People are going to complain. People are going to get upset. But they're urgent. They have to be done. And sometimes it's kind of hard to separate something, whether it's urgent or not important or not important if it's urgent. Right? Something like buying groceries. That is kind of important, right? If we don't buy groceries, we may starve or our family does not get fed. But yet that's not important in the sense of accomplishing the bigger issues of what God has for us. And there are things that are urgent that are also important. Okay, maybe this is like when you go to the doctor and you get that bad health report, right? You need to take better care of your health or else something bad is going to happen. That's urgent and important. This is maybe when we have issues in our family that need to be resolved, whether there's a conflict or emergencies or certain things that need to be taken care of. Maybe this is major projects that we face in our work or in our families, things that have to be done that can't be put off until later. And so these are things that are urgent and also important. These are things that cannot be put off, but are also need to be done soon. All right, so sometimes maybe we need to consider how important is this thing that I'm doing that is urgent. All right, can this wait till later? All right, is this something that needs to be done right now, or can I put it off for another time? Or is this something that I can just kind of stop doing altogether? Maybe I can hire someone to do it for me, or maybe I can delegate it to somebody else. All right, so we need to think about, is this important? It's urgent, but is it important? It's urgent, but is it important? All right, and finally, this brings us to the last section of the Eisenhower matrix. Things that are important, but not urgent. Things are important, but not urgent. And I think this is one that we really need to stop and consider. All right, because this is the one that gets most easily overlooked. All right, things in our life that are very, very important, but they're not demanding of our attention. All right, they're not going to just knock on our door and say, this has to be done right away. But these are things that if we ignore them, if we don't focus on them, if we don't make them a priority in our life, can be easily passed over. They can be forgotten or ignored over time. But yet these are very, very important things. All right, what are some examples of important things that are not urgent? One is our vocational life. What does God call me to do with my life? Right? Not just your job, that is important. Not just your role as a husband or wife or a parent, but what does God call me to do with my life? Right? Where has He put me to minister to people around me, to serve others, to make a difference in the world? Right? And no one really is going to urgently force you to consider this, right? But this is an important question of why are we here? How about our relational life, our relationships with our family, our community, our brothers and sisters in the church? Right? No one is going to say, hey, you need to really focus more on this today or else. But yet these are important things. How about our physical health? Right? Unless we get that call from the doctor, most of us will not really focus on our physical health as an important thing because it's not urgent. But yet we know that if we don't take care of our health, we'll face consequences down the road. And of course, most important of all is our spiritual life. Our spiritual life. Unless the pastor comes and knocks on your door, hey, have you been reading your Bible? Usually our spiritual life is not something that's very urgent, right? But yet it's something that's very important. And if we neglect our walk with God, eventually we'll face the consequences of that. It will affect the people that we're becoming. It will affect the lives that we're living. And so a lot of times in our life, it's easy to ignore or to not make time for the things that are important, but yet not urgent. And maybe as we're thinking about this, we can think about areas of our life that maybe that I need to put more time into this. I need to maybe spend more time with my children. Or maybe I need to go out to have some one-on-one time with my husband or my wife. Maybe I need to give God more of the time to work in my heart. Eisenhower said in the speech, he said, what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. Right? What is urgent is seldom important. Right? So often we can get caught up in just doing the urgent things in our life, but not focusing on what is really, really important. And this past few weeks, as we were traveling, we're visiting friends and family, and one thing that you always hear when you visit your relatives is what? Oh, your children are so big now, right? They grew so much. We didn't see them for a year, and now they're like, 6 inches taller. And for us, we're just like, oh, they look the same to us, right? But you don't realize how fast things change. And even as a father, I realize more and more the time that I have with my children is quickly running shorter and shorter. It's literally just, I can count it on one hand. I just have that many more years with them in my house. And I realize how important it is for that time to go by just doing urgent things, right? Got to get them to practice, got to get them to school, got to get the homework done, but yet not doing what is really important, building those relationships, investing into my children's life, teaching them to follow the Lord and helping them to grow in the Lord. It's like one day they're in diapers and the next day they're off to college. I think most of us realize how quickly time passes us by. And if we only focus on what is urgent, we can miss out on what is really important. Right? And as we think about the year ahead of us, we really want to understand what is important. What are the important things that we need to focus our time and our resources on, rather than just letting the time go by, focusing only on what needs to be done in the urgent. And so the Bible reminds us, focus on your fields first. Focus on the most important thing. Get your priorities in order, and then everything else will fall into place. All right, one more verse, Proverbs 17:24. A discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. A discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. What is this saying here? It's contrasting two different people. The first is a person who's discerning. And what does that mean? A discerning person knows the difference between right and wrong. Right? A discerning person knows how to make the right choices, how to keep their eyes focused on what is important. They keep wisdom in view. And the biblical sense of wisdom is to honor God, to know God, and to make the right choices in the application of knowledge, is to know what needs to be done and how to do it. On the other hand, the fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. All right, this fool is chasing everything under the sun. They're not focused on one thing, but they're just looking everywhere. They're distracted by all the things that are around them, rather than focusing on what is important. Right? And so here, this verse reminds us of the importance of our perspective. Okay, what are we keeping our eyes on? Are we keeping our eyes on the wisdom of God for us, or are we being distracted by so many other things? Are we just focusing on the next new, shiny, exciting thing that comes across our path? Or do we keep our eyes focused on the most important thing that God has for us? Right? What does God have? What does God want to do in my life? And what is God doing in my life? Right? Am I keeping my perspective on the most important things? In the Bible, the idea of wisdom is always connected to our relationship with God. In fact, in 1 Corinthians, it says that it is because of him, because of God, that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God. That is, he is our righteousness, our holiness, and redemption. All right, so when we look at Christ, we see the embodiment of wisdom. That when we focus our lives on Jesus, that is the first place that we can start gaining wisdom in our life. And in other ways to say that when we put God first in our life, everything else takes its proper place. Right? If you are a Christian, if you're a follower of God, the number one most important thing, above all the urgent things, above all the things demanding of your time and attention, is your relationship with God. It should be your relationship with God. Above your family, above your work, above your to-do list, the most important thing in your life is your walk with Christ. Right? Why is that? Why is that? Because it shapes everything else in us. My walk with Christ affects my relationship with my family. My walk with Christ affects how I approach my work. My walk with Christ affects how I'm growing, how I'm the person that I'm becoming. My walk with Christ affects my calling and purpose and vocation in this world, why God has literally put me here. And if we only focus on things that are unimportant, we miss out on the most important thing, on knowing Jesus and walking with him. Jesus told us in Matthew 22, what is the most important thing that we should do with our lives? It is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind, what we call the Great Commandment. Above everything else, make sure that your heart is love and focused on loving the Lord. And when that takes place, then we can love our neighbor. In Matthew 28, Jesus calls us on what we call the Great Commission. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Right? He says that we have a mission in this world, not just to focus on our lives, not just to live in a way that pleases us, but to minister to the world around us, to help other people know Jesus, to impact their lives with the gospel. And that's the mission that God has given to us, the most important and primary mission. In Matthew 6, Jesus says, seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be given to you as well. All right, again, Jesus here is talking about priorities. If you focus on Jesus first, if you put the kingdom first place in your life, if you make God's mission the center of all that you do, everything else will take care of itself. You don't have to worry about food and clothes and all these other worries of life, but seek his kingdom first and foremost. Seek his kingdom first, above it all. So this morning I want to invite you to really consider this year ahead, these next 365 days, 52 weeks, and 12 months. All right, what are the important things in your life that need to be taken care of? And where is God in that picture? Is God at the center? Is he at the focus of everything? And of all the other important things, are they in proper relation to God in your life? Right? And maybe there's other areas of our life that God is reminding us of. These are important things that we need to put more focus on. Let's not just get caught up in the urgent things, but let's get focused on what truly, truly matters. As I've been thinking about this year ahead as a pastor, I've realized again and again, I've shared this many times, but it's so easy for me to focus on urgent things, right? And as a pastor, there's a lot of urgent things. There's always some fires that need to be put out, right? And there's always, things that in the building that are breaking. Sometimes I have to fix the toilet at the last minute because it's not working, or sometimes the sound system's not working, or the heat's not working. By the way, we're working on the heat in the fellowship hall. It will get fixed soon, hopefully. Thank you for your patience and your warm jackets. Sometimes there's, things that, Pastor, I need help with this, I need help with that. And those are good things in a way. They need to get done. They're helping people. But I'm looking again and again at the biggest things in my calling as a pastor. Am I helping people to know Christ? Am I seeking out those who are lost or hurting? Am I preaching the gospel in a way that people can know Christ more? And even for me, it's so easy to just focus on these fires that need to be put out, these urgent things that need to get done. But I'm praying for myself and for all of us that we'll not get so focused on those small and important things, but they'll really keep our eyes focused on the mission that God has for us. All right, there's another very old popular illustration made popular by Stephen Covey and other people about this having a glass container, like a big glass jar, right? And trying to fit these different sized rocks into this glass jar. And probably most of us heard this before, that if you put all of these small rocks into the jar first, what will happen? Right? There's no more space for the bigger rocks. Right? But if you're to take the bigger rocks that you have and put them into the jar first, what happens? Then there's space for the smaller rocks. Right? And the application is very simple, that we need to take the big rocks in our life and put them in place first. And then when we do that, then there's space for the smaller things. And so as we think about our lives, we really want to consider, what are the most important things that God has for us? What are the most important areas that I need to commit myself to and not overlook in this year ahead? What are your big rocks? What are the big rocks that God is calling you to focus on? How is God calling you to spend this year ahead, to invest wisely in the time that he's given you? And next week we'll talk a little bit more about what it means to put Christ first. And the week after that we'll talk a little bit more about how practically we can keep focused on the important things. But this morning I just want to ask you, where are you investing? Where are you focusing your life? Right? What are the things that God is calling you towards? And what does he have for you in the year ahead? As we're going to go into a time of communion, let's take a few minutes just to bow our heads together. And maybe let's just take a second to just reflect. Maybe God is reminding you of some areas that are important, that you've been neglecting. Maybe there's areas that you want to invest more. Maybe there's some goals or priorities that you really want to tackle in this year ahead. But as we just take a few minutes to bow our heads, let's prepare our hearts and really focus our hearts on what God has for us. Let's pray together.